South Africa's national security is at risk. This is the shady background of one of Ramaphosa's biggest influences. So this massive influencer of the South African president is Imtiaz Sooliman, the founder of the charity Gift of the Givers. While Gift of the Givers and Sooliman are celebrated in South Africa and many parts of the world as humanitarians, Sooliman's background, as well as that of the organization, is far more sordid than initially meets the eye. But before we get into that, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel? All you have to do is click on the subscribe button in the bottom left corner of the video. Now let's get into it. So a few days ago, the South African news cycle was rocked by the flight which transported 153 Gazan refugees to OR Tambo International Airport. So I'm not going to go into that full story right here because first of all, it has been sufficiently covered by many people. If you would like to see the details of the story, I certainly recommend checking out Ramaphosa's video on the matter, as well as that of Byron from Morning Shot, as they cover it incredibly well. But for the interest of time and staying on topic, I'm not going to go into it in depth here. But there are some aspects of the story that need to be mentioned. In this press statement from the ACDP, the party questions Imtiaz Sooliman's involvement in the Gaza flight debacle. So, first of all, it explains that it is disingenuous of Dr. Imtiaz Sooliman from Gift of the Givers to blame Israel for the incomplete travel documentation of the Gazans. He was very vocal in claiming that Israel somehow decided against stamping the passports of these individuals so that South Africa wouldn't know where they've been. So basically to compromise them. But as it explains right here, Israel replaced physical passport stamps in January 2013 with a standard electronic entry or exit slips. So what's particularly interesting is this paragraph right here, and it explains that entry into South Africa is controlled by the Border Management Authority under the Immigration Act, not by Israel. But what's even more pressing than that is that, as the ACDP succinctly put it, the ACDP would also like the answers to who sponsored this flight and if Sooliman, who pressurized the authorities to allow the Palestinians to enter the country, have any special unknown preferential powers over and above the legislators of South Africa. So this is quite important to note because already the allegations are coming in that he somehow has power or influence over the government of Cyril Ramaphosa. So it's no secret that the presidency is a big admirer of Sooliman's work. They awarded him the Order of the Baobab in silver. And it explains over here in Sooliman's bio that he was born in Potchefstroom, moved to Sastry College in Durban in 1978 and qualified as a medical doctor at the then University of Natal Medical School in 1984. It then explains how he gave up his career as a medical doctor to pursue the field of humanitarian aid. And in 1992, he founded the Gift of the Givers Association and has since then delivered more than 160 million rand in a 13-year period to 22 countries, including South Africa. But what this description conveniently leaves out is what Sooliman got up to directly before founding Gift of the Givers. So as explained by Marika Sporos, in this Institute of Race Relations article, Sooliman is arguably his own worst enemy by fraternizing publicly with leaders of Hamas and other groups prescribed as terrorist organizations in many countries. These include the Muslim Brotherhood and its Al-Quds Foundation offshoot that have known links with Hamas. Sooliman started a South African branch of the foundation in 1991 before handing it over to start Gift of the Givers in 1992. The Al-Quds Foundation's reputation is sufficiently checkered to give potential and current GOTG donors pause for thought. So it's important to note at this moment that sometimes the organization is referred to as the Al-Quds Foundation and at other times the Al-Aqsa Foundation. But this is something we'll get into a little bit later. So if you thought that this already sounds suspicious, we're only now going to get into the really gritty details. So in this report from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, it's explained that Imtiaz Sooliman, founder and director of Gift of the Givers, was recently appointed to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's National Dialogue. And so not only has Sooliman pressured the South African government to accept the Palestinian refugees, but he's also a member of the National Dialogue Committee. And so it's clear where his influence lies. Moving on, Gift of the Givers was identified as part of the Union of Good as early as November 2002, according to the union's website. The United States sanctioned the Union of Good 6 years later, noting that the leadership of Hamas created the Union of Good in late 2000, shortly after the start of the Second Intifada, in order to facilitate the transfer of funds to Hamas. In 1991, prior to founding Gift of the Givers, Sooliman founded the South African branch of the Al-Aqsa Foundation. And as we can see, there's already that name change. Some people refer to it as the Al-Quds Foundation and others Al-Aqsa. But while we now see that Gift of the Givers has links to the Union of Good, we also see that Sooliman himself has been personally involved in some incredibly shady activities. So much so that they've actually alarmed the United States. So here we have an official press release from the Department of the Treasury in the United States. So as we can see here, the US Treasury Department has designated the Al-Aqsa Foundation as a specially designated global terrorist entity under Executive Order 13224. This is back in the George Bush administration. Now, if we scroll down, we see something incredibly worrying, which is that Al-Aqsa is a critical part of Hamas terrorist support infrastructure through its headquarters in Germany and branch offices in the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Sweden, Pakistan, South Africa, Yemen, and elsewhere. Al-Aqsa funnels money collected for charitable purposes to Hamas terrorists. So all of a sudden, we see how not only has the US decided to sanction the global body, but they've also called out the South African branch in particular. Unfortunately, this shady behavior doesn't end there. So, a former acting judge of the South African High Court, Lawrence Novosenitz, has explained here a little bit more about the Al-Quds Foundation and how its name changed. So, as he writes, the Al-Quds Foundation, headed by Ibrahim Gabriels, replaced Al-Aqsa Foundation in South Africa. So, the Al-Quds Foundation SA describes itself as the South African branch of the Greater Al-Quds International Foundation, which was established in Beirut in 2001 by Hamas to raise funds for the terror organization through the guise of charity. So, remember I explained before how there was that name change that we all need to take note of. Well, the reason for taking note of this is coming up right now. So although the Al-Aqsa Foundation replaced the Al-Quds Foundation, at least on the surface, we see that the Al-Quds Foundation is still operational in some way, shape, or form. So in this Jerusalem Post investigation, it is explained. Research conducted by the Jerusalem Post staff and several sources uncovered what happens to be a network of several South African organizations and strawman companies deeply involved with funding Hamas activities through the Al-Quds Foundation, an international group sanctioned by the US and outlawed by Israel, using accounts registered in major local South African banks, Standard Bank, Nedbank, and ABSA. So some of you may be familiar with the story, which broke out last year. So as explained here, the Al-Quds International Foundation was established in Beirut in 2001 by Hamas members to raise funds for the terror organization through the guise of charity. As you can see here, Al-Aqsa all of a sudden switched to Al-Quds. According to the US Department of Treasury, the Hamas leadership runs all of the foundation's affairs through Hamas members who serve on the board and other administrative committees, while all documents, plans, budgets, and projects are drafted by Hamas officials. Additionally, several senior Hamas officials, including specially designated global terrorists Musa Abu Marzouk and Osama Hamdan, served on Al-Quds' board of trustees. You see, it's not just the United States and certain Western allies who've taken issue with the Al-Aqsa Foundation, or Al-Quds. 5 months after the report that I showed you previously, a source told the Jerusalem Post that Al-Quds Foundation South Africa was designated as a terror-related entity on World Check, a database of politically exposed persons and heightened risk agents used globally to identify and manage financial, regulatory, and reputational risks. So, Al-Quds Foundation SA, which since the report has vanished from the internet, but whose activity continues nonetheless, described itself as the South African branch of the Greater Al-Quds International Foundation, established in Beirut in 2001 by Hamas officials, as we've previously explained. And so all of a sudden we're getting a picture that is abundantly clear, which is that Al-Aqsa, or Al-Quds as it's known in certain circles, is clearly directly linked to terror financing. We also know that Sooliman, prior to establishing Gift of the Givers, established the local South African branch of this network. Now, there have been reports that Sooliman has distanced himself from the group since leaving and being part of Gift of the Givers, but surely, if this group was used to help fund and even found Hamas, he must have had prior knowledge, because the dates simply don't add up. Remember, Hamas was founded in 1987. Sooliman started this branch in South Africa in 1991. Surely there must have been some knowledge of what was really going on behind the scenes. But, as we've seen, the South African government has taken absolutely no note of this issue, seems to have no problem, and in fact, Sooliman's status has been elevated quite notably in Ramaphosa's eyes. In fact, we can see it right here in this report of the National Convention in the lead up to the National Dialogue this year, where Ramaphosa himself says, "I wish to thank the members of the Eminent Persons Group, all of whom has graciously and enthusiastically accepted my invitation to serve as the champions and guarantors of the National Dialogue." And if we take a look through the list of people, sure, we see lots of very prominent guests. You have Mr. Robbie Brosen, entrepreneur and business person. He founded Nando's. We also have Siya Kolisi, the Springbok captain and world champion. Mia Leroux, Miss South Africa 2024. And look, all the way down the list, Sooliman himself. And so clearly, Sooliman's shady past really doesn't bother the Ramaphosa administration all that much. We can then also talk about the fact that Gift of the Givers, while a charity that has helped many people through millions of rands of donations, has pretty questionable priorities. You see, Gift of the Givers has supported the ICJ case against Israel lodged by South Africa. And as we saw in the presidency's biography of Sooliman, his organization contributed about 160 million rand to South Africa and other countries in a 13-year period to 22 countries, including South Africa. So what's really important is that we keep that 160 million rand over 13 years in our minds, and here's why. So in this EWN article, we see how the DA questioned the government's spending of more than 130 million rand on its case against Israel at the ICJ. Now, while this is certainly a nice bit of political grandstanding, we know that taking forward this case has absolutely nothing to do with helping South Africans and the impoverished people within South Africa. If Gift of the Givers gave 160 million rand over 13 years to charity, then why on earth are they supporting this case, which on its own is going to cost about 130 million rand, almost the same as that amount? It's a terrible waste of taxpayer money, particularly when South Africa has so many of its own problems to fix, including GDP growth for the year of less than 1% and over 42% expanded unemployment rate. This really brings into question where Sooliman, the Gift of the Givers, and Ramaphosa's priorities lie. But before we end, I'd like to leave you with this quote. I don't need any permission from anybody in the world to tell me what to do. I break the laws all the time. I follow Islamic law, and Islamic law overrides any other law. A quote by Imtiaz Sooliman, Gift of the Givers. Shout out to the Kifness, Dave Scott, for posting this on X. So there you have it. This is the person who is one of Ramaphosa's biggest influencers, who tells him what to do. Hopefully, more and more people can take note of the reality surrounding the sordid situation, and through awareness, people can finally start to take note of what is going on in South Africa, what the risks to national security are, and ultimately vote differently and take action and support civil society groups who are actually looking to make a positive difference to the country. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you found it insightful, please remember to subscribe to the channel and share it far and wide so that more people can become informed on such important topics. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.